All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second virtual NYC DevOps meetup of this year. Everything is going virtual, so we figured we'll try it as well. Before we get started and introduce Nathan and the talk, what we usually do as a meetup is give time. Well, we did some introductions, but if anyone else wants to introduce themselves, or if you have an announcement, if you're hiring, you're looking for a job, or anything that's related to DevOps SRE, I'll give it a minute, see if anyone has anything.
I mean, I could chime in there. So Able2 is looking for a VP of operations, so managing the DevOps and the technology operations team. And then they're also looking for a manager of DevOps. So if you're interested, you can send me a chat message and I could fill you in on the details. And it's remote friendly also, by the way.
Cool. Anyone else?
I have a job opening. So I work at stackoverflow.com. You may have heard of our website. And our website now lists a number of job openings. I'll mention we have a VP of product engineering, a number of software developer positions, and very soon it will list like a director of IT and some other positions. So check it out.
Awesome. Anyone else?
Yeah. I'm looking for director of IT position. So I guess that Tom saying you guys are looking for that position. I can refer to you offline.
Cool. Yeah, feel free to post link in the chat as well if anyone has a page where they can look up more. Cool. Anyone else?
Yeah, so you might have seen in the news that Flywheel Sports filed for bankruptcy last month. So I'm available, and I think another developer might also be available and looking for a job. So thank you very much, Tom, for posting the link. We'll take a look at it.
Cool. All right, so I just realized I didn't introduce myself and Tom, the co-host. So yeah, my name is Adarsh Shah. Some of you might have seen me at Stack Exchange when we are doing in person. And yeah, maybe around, I also help out with DevOpsDays New York, the conference as well. And Tom, do you want to introduce?
Oh, hi, I'm Tom Limoncelli, one of the co-hosts. I work at Stack Overflow and glad to be here.
I don't think Russ is online. Russ is the third co-organizer who helps out with the meetup as well. All right, cool. So that being said, let's start with the introduction of Nathan, and then we can get into the talk. Actually, one more thing. And I'll announce this towards the end as well. So we also have the next meetup posted as well, where we have John Alspa talk about findings from the field, 2 years of learning from incidents, right? So Alspa talks about incidents and, resilience engineering and stuff like that. So really interesting talk. I'm looking forward to it. So yeah, if you all haven't signed up and want to sign up, the meetup is already posted. All right, so let's talk about today. So yeah, welcome, Nathan. Thanks for agreeing to give the talk. And a little bit of introduction about Nathan for those who don't know. He is a cloud developer advocate at Google. He's been around and kind of helping the community understand, DevOps and SRE concepts. I remember meeting Nathan the first time at DevOpsDays Baltimore. I think he was still helping organize that. And then he used to also help. I don't know if you're still involved with DevOpsDays DC, but I know you were helping out with multiple DevOpsDays.
Yep.
And then now he's also part of the global organizing committee for DevOpsDays. So a lot involved in the community, helping organize. And then he's also a well-known speaker at various events. Yeah, I mean, always great to hear what he has to say. So welcome. And then today's talk is about SRE, right? Site reliability engineering, and the concepts of it. So yeah, that's the intro. And Nathan, take it away.
All right. Hey, thank you so much for having me. And let me just verify you can see my slide and just my slide. Yeah, damn. I was kind of hoping you'd see my inbox so that y'all could do some work for me while I'm presenting today, but slides are what you get instead, I guess. So yes, thank you. I'm really happy to be here. I have mixed feelings, honestly, about all of the virtual events and meetups. On the one hand, I miss being in the same room with each and every one of you and like having a real conversation. But on the other hand, we have people from all over the world that are able to join us tonight. And I think that this virtual format really makes it much more accessible to so many people. So for those of you that got up early this morning to attend this, or it's very late in your evening, thank you so much. I really appreciate that you're here. And do take the time while you're here to introduce yourself in the chat. If you didn't get a chance to, post questions there as they come up, and I'll try to get them answered. Excuse me. So I want to start talking about SRE, site reliability engineering. And like all good talks, it starts with an expletive. Oh, expletive. But you know, we're all working from home, so I can't actually use an expletive. I'm just going to use the word expletive. So you'll just have to replace that with your own. Here's what I want to ask you. During your last incident, during the last outage that you had at work, I just want you to think about this for a second. How did you find out about that? What alerted you to the fact that you had a problem with your site, with your service, with your application? Maybe you could put some ideas there, either in the chat or even just unmute yourself. How did you know? How did you know that there was a problem last time it happened? Let's see, a user called, the user, Datadog told you, the user contacted us, some external monitors, great. My next question on this is, what was the impact to your users? Did the, and obviously those of you who said the user told us, it clearly impacted them. So it had some impact on them. For those of you that said monitors, did the users care? Did the users notice what the problem was? So just think about this. And again, feel free to share in the chat. It's great to just sort of share those war stories. And my last question to you is, how did the organization respond? What happened? What happened? So think for a minute after you recovered from that incident. How did things change around the organization? How did things change around the company? Did you change your approach to the work that you were doing? Did others around you change the approach to the work that they were doing? I'll leave these 3 questions with you to think about while I'm giving the talk, and I want to revisit these at the end of the talk. But think about this. How did you find out? What was the impact to your customers? And how did the organization respond? What did they do differently after that? So let's jump right into SRE then. What is site reliability engineering? Well, I mean, this is interesting because one of the things that's true about site reliability engineering is you can go out into the world and find a site reliability engineer. It is a title, it's a job role. But the truth is that reliability is as much a mindset and a set of principles and practices as it is a job role. So these principles and practices, you know, within Google, we've developed them over the past decade or more. And since we've started developing them, a few years ago, we wrote a book. We believe that SRE is what you get when you treat operations as a software problem. We believe that this helps organizations improve. And we've taken our learnings out into the community. And you know what? SRE is now much larger than Google. It is a community of people, a set of practices, an approach to reliability. That approach, though, from a Google perspective, is founded on 3 key principles. The first key principle that we think about is that the most important feature of any system is its reliability. Now, the most important feature. So first, is reliability even a feature? I would argue, yes, of course it's a feature. It's a requirement of your system. Speaking of that word requirements, how many of you, just a quick show of hands, use the term non-functional requirements? Or have heard that term, non-functional requirements? Yeah. When we talk about non-functional requirements, what are we talking about? We're talking about things like scalability, security, reliability, operability. I think non-functional requirements is the most heinous phrase, maybe not the most, it is one of them, that we use in our industry. If you don't have those non-functional requirements, your application, well, it isn't functional. So who cares? Non-functional requirements, I think we should strike that word from our vocabulary, from our documentation. These are operational requirements. This is what happens when our software is actually running and being used by people. And that's why we build software. And so I argue, and the SRE principle is founded here, that the most important feature of that system is its reliability. It doesn't matter how great that feature is if your customers can't access it or can't use it. The next principle, though, is that our monitoring does not decide our reliability. Our users do. And we saw this already in some of the responses that you gave, excuse me, to the first question. How did you know that the system was broken? Well, your users told you. I certainly have experienced the state where I get woken up in the middle of the night and told about a thing that nobody cares about. On the other hand, I've certainly gotten a call from a CEO saying, hey, Nathan, site's bad, something's wrong. All of our sales are off. And I pull up my Nagios dashboards and I say, no, boss, everything's green. It's all good. There's nothing wrong with the systems. Of course, he was right. The customers knew they were having problems. So our monitoring isn't what decides our reliability. It's our users. And our third principle is this: meeting our reliability goals requires that we have well-engineered software. Without well-engineered software, everything falls apart. But we've also learned that great software is not enough. To meet our goals, our promises, we need operations that are aligned around meeting those goals. And we need business practices that empower both of those teams. Perhaps most importantly, we need all of these people to share a mission. And for that, we need shared language. We're going to argue, so we need to argue effectively. And this is one of the key practices or frameworks within SRE. It's a language around reliability. And that language, it starts with an S. There are 3 S's that are foundational to SRE. We have our our service level indicators, our service level objectives, and a service level agreement. And I want to talk about each one of those in turn. So a service level indicator, this is a measurement that describes how your users are experiencing your service. So it's a metric. It's something that we can go out and we can measure. But not every metric makes for a good SLI. The important thing to think about when you think about your service level indicators is it's from the user's experience, from the customer. How does the customer experience your site? We measure lots and lots of things in our practice of technology. We measure things like CPU utilization, how much memory is free on this particular node. Those aren't good service level indicators. We have to think about it from a user's perspective. Next, we have our SLO, or our service level objective. This is our target, the target that we're setting for the overall health of our service. How good do we need our service to be? And actually, that's not the right question to ask. It's not how good do we need the service to be. It's how good does our customer need the service to be. And then the final S, or the third S here, is the SLA. the service level agreement. And I'm sure you've heard of SLAs before. These are contractual obligations. But here's the thing about SLAs. SLAs are not the realm, not the responsibility of SREs. In fact, as an SRE, we should stay as far away from possible as we can from an SLA. I want to remind you, when we think about our service level indicators and our service level objectives, we're thinking about how the user experiences a service. Now, I went out to the web and I found an SLA. And let's just look at this SLA really quickly. So this SLA says, you know, we will use commercially reasonable efforts, and we'll measure service during each calendar month. If outside of the planned maintenance window, for 2 consecutive months, we miss the goal that we've set for you, the goal that we've agreed to, then you can cancel your service in the following month. Oh, and by the way, if you want to know how well we're performing, it's easy to find out. Just open up a support ticket with us, and we'll tell you how good our availability is. Now, think about this for a second. Think about this from a user's perspective. As a user, do you think you could be unhappy and the company still be meeting their service level objectives? Of course you could be very unhappy. In fact, early on in my career, I was talking with an attorney who was a contracts attorney at a software company that we were working with. And he gave me one of the best pieces of advice about contracts, like SLAs. He said the only time people will go to their drawer and pull out a contract is when they're unhappy, right? You don't need a contract for when the relationship is going well. You don't need a contract when things are great. You need the contract for when things go wrong. And so it is in your best interest to keep those contracts shelved away, kept in the drawer. And frankly, with the practice of site reliability engineering, we care about keeping our users happy. And clearly, a user can be very unhappy with a service and it still be meeting its SLA. So from now on, just forget SLAs, stay as far away from them as you can, focus on keeping your users happy. All right, so let's go back then to the SLO, the service level objective. What is that? It's a target for the overall health of your service, but what is it? What should it be? So SRE and the practice of SRE helps us move away from making decisions by shouting louder than everyone else. It should be this reliable, or by attrition. I don't know about you, but you know, there are people who work in places and then someone new comes in and they lay down new rules and people look at that person and say, well, I don't know, that person's probably got a 2-year tenure. So we'll listen to what they have to say and in 2 years they'll be gone. And then we can make up new rules. So I don't really have to follow what their rules are. We can make decisions based on attrition. SRE gives us the language we need to work together. It gives us a principled way to argue about the desired reliability of a service. What are we going to promise and to whom? How do we define what good means in context of that service? And how much good do we need? Or more importantly, how much good do our customers need? So, Tom, I'm going to ask you a question. And I don't mean to put you on the spot. Well, I do mean to put you on the spot. And I'm going to do it right now. So I have this service. How reliable do you want it to be?
100%.
Aha, 100%. 100%.
Even when I'm asleep, 24/7.
24/7, 100% of the time. Raise your hand if you have had that be the answer to this question before, right? How reliable do you want this service to be? 100%. Well, the truth is, Tom, I hate to tell you this, but you're wrong. The more frequent answer I hear to this question goes along these lines. If I ask someone, how reliable do you want this service to be? I get a response like this. You know what? I believe in you, Nathan. You're one of the best system administrators I know. I would like you to make this system 110% reliable. When you do that, I'm going to get you a big bonus, and I'm going to ensure that promotion for you this year. 110% reliable. So obviously, 110%, we can't do that. And of course, we can't do 100% reliable either. I like to throw out this question. I like to throw out non-functional requirements. Those are operational requirements. How reliable do you want this service to be? Throw out that question. Here's the question I prefer to ask. When do we need to make a system more reliable? When should we improve the reliability of a system? And a good guide, a good rule of thumb for the answer to that question, we need to make a service more reliable just before our users stop using it, or just before our users become unhappy with the service. We want to keep our users happy. We want them to continue using the service. So if we notice that they've stopped or changed their behavior in some sort of negative way, it's probably past time for us to make it more reliable. We also know, of course, that 100% is the wrong reliability target, excuse me, for basically everything. We know this. We cannot get to 100% reliability. And in fact, it's not a goal worth chasing. If we set 100% reliability as our goal, everything is an emergency. And we're never going to get there. So we're just setting ourselves up for failure. So one of the frameworks that SRE gives us is this framework that we call an error budget. Because if you target 100% reliability, you're implying that you're targeting 0% unreliability. But we know that we can't get to 100%. We know that the only truly reliable system is one, it's a beautiful system. It does nothing at all. It never changes. It never has anything change around it. It exists in a vacuum, hermetically sealed from the world. It's impossible. Not only is it impossible, nobody needs it. Nobody actually needs that. So when we think about an error budget, we use an error budget to describe the difference between what our service level objective is and 100%. The delta, the difference in there, is our error budget. So let's say, for example, that we have a service that receives 1 billion queries a month, and we've set a service level objective of 3 nines, or 99.9%. That means we have 0.1% errors that we can spend. That's 1 million errors that we can spend each month. But I know you might be asking, like, how do you spend an error? What does that even mean? Well, the error budget and SLIs and SLOs, they all allow us to speak the same language of reliability. And when I say all of us, I really mean all of us. SREs, developers, development managers, product managers, product owners, DevOps engineers, and even the business. We can all speak this same language, and we all want to deliver concepts and features to market as fast as possible while meeting our reliability goals. So the error budget becomes this communication framework that we can use to help us make those prioritization decisions. We have a finite capacity for work. How and where should we deploy that capacity? How and when should we revisit those prioritization decisions? Because here's the other big difference between an SLA and an SLO. That SLA that we looked at earlier, that is contractual language that's going to remain in place for years. If you set an objective of keeping your customers happy and expect that that objective is going to be static for years, you're wrong. Your customer expectations are going to change over time. So a service level objective is something that we need to continually reevaluate, continually look at our customers to say, are we keeping our customers happy? And if we aren't, let's focus our energy and our engineering capacity on how do we improve reliability. But the other side of that is true also. If we are completely blowing away our reliability goals, we have a ton of excess error budget, that's a signal from the system that we aren't moving fast enough or we aren't learning enough. So we should do more. We can maybe deprioritize some of those reliability decisions. But at the end of the day, it's all about how do we get everyone across the organization thinking and working towards the same goals. So SLOs, error budgets, they help us align incentives across the entire product lifecycle. Everyone is rowing the boat in the same direction. Agreeing SLOs between the business, development, operations. When we do this in advance, it takes the emotion out of decision making also. So when we're in a fire, we're fighting a fire, we got that fire out. Now maybe there's a tendency to be angry and want to make big changes. We've already made the decision. We've already created a framework, excuse me, for what we're going to do after. All right, so that's SLIs, SLOs, and an error budget. There's more to SRE than just that, of course. So here's a hierarchy of things that SREs work on. Successfully operating a service entails a wide range of activities, from monitoring to planning capacity, responding to incidents, and so forth. But I have a slight problem. I know that some of my coworkers wrote this service reliability hierarchy. I don't actually like it because when you look at this, you might think the right place to invest all of our time is on monitoring. No model is actually perfect. So I prefer to think of it as activities or tags. And maybe these are swim lanes that you use in your backlog. But we have to do a little bit of all of these all the time, or maybe shift our priorities around. But it is about learning from incidents. It's about driving all the way back to the product decisions that we made. If you think about it, how do you make a system more reliable? Sometimes you have to go all the way back to the architecture or the features that you're designing and shipping with that. Now, another thing that's true about SRE is that we are committed to sublinear scaling. What does that mean? As the size of our service grows, whether that's the number of machines that we have to look after, the number of users or customers that are using that system, the number of developers that are coming on board to ship new features. If we scale our SREs literally with that, we can't maintain that. We can't keep up. So we have to get to a place where our SRE staff can actually level off. And we do that through automation. We do that by building a community of practice around reliability. We do that by sharing responsibility with the developers around what are the reliability requirements. And we talk all the time about eliminating toil. So, excuse me, toil. What is this? Toil is the stuff that keeps us from achieving that sublinear scaling. Specifically, it's manual, repetitive, automatable work that's void of long-term value. A great example, SSHing into a machine to restart a service. We've all done it, but it's boring, it's rote, it's a procedural task, and it's a bad use of our time, of the human's time. The human that has to do that, they should use their creative, flexible, spongy human brain. They could be doing something with much more strategic value. On top of that, humans aren't even very good at this sort of thing. Maybe you've read the Night Capital example, where a human had to do something manually. If you haven't read about Night Capital, I encourage you to go and look it up. And it is October, so it's a beautiful IT horror story for you. Think about Halloween and how everything gets scary, Night Capital. But, we're liable to make mistakes because we're human, and that's not good. So as SREs, we work to identify and eliminate as much toil as possible. But it doesn't matter how much toil we eliminate. It doesn't matter how reliable our systems are. Incidents are still going to happen. Things are going to break. So it's really about how do we respond to that. I was talking to some friends, I don't know, a little while ago that are in the fire service. So they are firefighters. And they gave me something, they said something to me that I found really stuck with me. They said, you know what? As firefighters, we have never responded to an emergency. Think about that. If your house catches on fire right now, that is an emergency for you. But that is a typical day of work for a firefighter. A firefighter shows up to work expecting to be called to put out a fire. That's their job. Firefighters don't respond to emergencies. They just go and do the work. Incidents are just the work. We have to practice how do we respond to incidents. We have to inspect how did we respond to that incident. Our goal, of course, is to make the outage or the incident as short as possible. In order to do so, we need to have clearly defined roles. We need to have clear communication paths. We need to practice this. We also, of course, need to collect good information, because after that incident happens, we need to learn from that incident. And, you know, Adarsh said that John Alspaugh is coming next month to this very meetup. You should come and listen to him. You shouldn't even pay attention to anything I'm about to say on this slide. John has better information. I am going to steal a quote from him, though. An incident is an unplanned investment. Reap the rewards of that investment. How do you learn most when there is an incident? You didn't plan to make that investment in your system, that investment in learning. But how are you going to turn that around and get the most out of that investment? So when we learn from incidents, this is where, as a team, as an organization, we can truly start to improve. And SRE, if nothing else, is about a mindset, adopting a mindset of continuous improvement. So let's go back to that expletive. How did you find out? Well, it was your service level indicator. You have SLIs today. Even if you aren't measuring them, even if you aren't looking after them, they exist. So as an SRE, as someone that's concerned with reliability, your job is to go and figure out, what are the service level indicators for my service? What was the impact to your customers? Were your customers angry? Were they upset? This is where that service level objective, this is where that goal lives. And then how did your organization change or respond? Sometimes when there's an outage, we've put a lot of focus on how did this break? What new process do we need to put in place? What new safeguards do we need to put in place? These are the consequences of your error budget. And I've worked with so many organizations who they have a huge outage. They go and they figure out what are the things that we can do to prevent this sort of class of failure in the future. And they come up with a long list of things. And what happens is some of those things are very easy to do and they get them done. Some of those things are very hard to do and they just wait. If we wait and get far enough away from that incident, no one's going to want us to do those things that were hard anyhow. That's the error budget. These are the consequences. We need to think about how do we apply that. So what I'm really trying to say here is that today you practice SRE. Today in your organization, you have service level indicators, you have service level objectives, and you have consequences for your error budget or for violating your error budget. You may not have the language to talk about them, but they exist within your organization. And so finding the language and sharing that language across the entire organization will help you improve the reliability of your services. It will help you improve the performance of your teams, and it will give you more pleasure in the work that you're doing. You'll be proud of that work because you're building more reliable systems, more resilient teams. This is what it's all about. All right, before we go to questions, I'm going to leave you with 3 books that you can check out. All 3 of these books are available to read for free on the Google SRE site. You can go to landing.google.com/SRE/books. You can read the Site Reliability Engineering book or the SRE book, the Site Reliability Workbook, and then Building Secure and Reliable Systems, the 3rd book. If you're not sure which one to start with, I'll just tell you a little bit about them. All the way on the left, the SRE book. This is how we do SRE at Google. After publishing this book, we got some feedback. Hey, it's great. That's how you do it at Google. I'm not Google. We aren't Google. How can we do it? That's where the reliability workbook came in. This is really about how do you take some of the practices and ideas that we use in Google and apply them within your own organization. And then the 3rd book, Building Secure and Reliable Systems. Well, it does what it says on the tin. I have to recommend a 4th book to you though. Unfortunately, it's not available online for free, but it is a great read, Implementing Service Level Objectives. This is by Alex Hidalgo, who I'm pretty sure is a member of this meetup group here in New York and would typically show up. So it is a practical guide to SLIs, SLOs, and error budgets. Alex has a ton of great information about how to put these things to work for you in your organization. With that, I'd like to say thank you so much for having me. It's really been my pleasure. Thank you for suffering through my own coughing. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let's see what questions I can answer for you.
Great, thanks, Nathan. Yeah, feel free to ask here, or you can post it on chat, whatever works for you.
And I'd like to thank Dave for answering some questions for me while I spoke. Also, it looks like you were chiming in there.
Nathan. Hi, Marcelo here.
Hey, Marcelo.
Quick question, and if you can comment a little bit about that. I think that it's very connected to the SLI and SLO and the reliability, how we construct our systems, right? And for example, a couple weeks ago, we had a huge outage from Microsoft on the Active Directory. And I think that everyone here that depend on the Active Directory had 3 hours of panic, and it was a very difficult situation. So my point is, with all the cloud technologies, we are increasing the number of dependencies that we have on our system. And I would like to hear you talk a little bit on these dependencies and how we can prevent that. Because in my point of view, we need to change the paradigm on how we develop the systems, right? Because when we create dependencies, we need to be defensive on our code. So if you can say a few words on that.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Marcelo. And I think you're spot on. It comes back to how do we design the systems. And so just a couple of things there. First, you mentioned Active Directory had an outage and you found yourself in a panic. So my first piece of advice is don't panic. It's okay. Like things break all the time. And yes, it is painful in the moment and it makes sense to panic in the moment. But take a breath. Like maybe panic for a second and then take a breath and then go about the business of solving that. And there is always this possibility that the thing that is causing the outage for you is out of your control. There's nothing that you can do other than report status to the people that are depending on you in your service. Hey, we know that it's broken, and keep that communication going. So one, that's a good thing to do. That helps your users build trust in you. We know that Marcelo's on this. Him and his team are taking care of this issue or at least looking after it. But once that issue is mitigated or resolved and you're back to normal functioning, this is the place where you look at your system and you say, wow, that error caused us to consume all of our error budget. We are now out of error budget. And potentially, we're out of error budget for a significant amount of time. Now, if you followed the rules of SRE to the T, that would basically mean you ship no new features. Your job right now is to go architect around that outage so that if Active Directory fails again, you'll have a way to not be impacted by that or not impacted as much. But the truth is, like, there are some services that are so fundamental that you've built your service around that it's hard to architect around them. And I've worked with, let me share one quick story. I worked with a retailer, an online retailer, and I had in the room with me, I was giving a talk not dissimilar to this one, talking about SRE practices, but I had product owners, I had developers, and I had operators all in the room. And we were talking. And one of the operators raised their hand and they said, you know, we were doing this thing a while back, and each week we would do like an operational review. And we were looking at all of our dashboards and our data. And what we saw was that our payment processing, the time that it took to process a payment was inching up, inching up, inching up. And unfortunately, that payment processing, we were relying on a third party. So we couldn't fix that. We couldn't fix that third party, but we knew we had to do something. So we got to work trying to bring that latency back down because we knew that as it went up, customers were going to start to lose trust in the payments that they were making and that they would stop ordering from us. We did not want that to happen. But here was the problem. Here was the problem that we ran into. These product people over here, they didn't want to stop shipping new features. These developers didn't stop writing new code. We had this issue we had to fix, but they kept throwing new stuff at us. So, you know, we're operators. We get the job done, right? We worked nights, we worked weekends. We brought that latency back down, and then everyone was happy. Well, I'll tell you what happened. The lead product owner in the room raised their hand, looked around to their colleagues on the product side, looked to that operator and said, there is not one product owner in this room, if they had known about that, who would have said, don't prioritize that work. Every single one of us would have said, prioritize that work, put our features on hold, fix this problem with the payment processor. Now, in that story, there's a little bit of like, maybe some hindsight bias. Like, would they have actually done that? Would they have actually prioritized that work in the moment? I don't know. But let's take them at their word. The flaw here was that there was no communication. I asked that team, I said, hey, so product folk, these operators, they're holding weekly operational reviews. When was the last time you were at one of those? The product owner said, we didn't even know they were happening, right? And so the error budget is a communication framework. We can use it to talk with one another. And so, Marcelo, getting back to your question, when we see that a third party or some sort of dependency that we have, when it is not meeting, first we need to understand what are its reliability guarantees or its reliability goals. And we need to architect our system such that we can assume that it's going to meet its reliability goals. But when it doesn't, how do we respond? We have to make a decision in that moment. Active Directory failed. It failed for 3 hours. How will we respond as an organization? Does this mean we spend the next 3 months completely getting Active Directory out of our infrastructure? That feels like maybe it's a little bit too much. Like, that's probably not the right response to that particular incident. But what is correct? How could we have solved that a little bit better or architect around that? And is it worth the investment? When was the last time that outage happened? In 5 years, we've had 3 hours of outage. Maybe that's okay. Maybe we can live with that. But we can't live with it if we don't talk about it, if we don't share those ideas with one another.
Yes, and I think it's very interesting one point that you mentioned, that sometimes our resilience plan is communication, right? If we cannot control, at least let's be open and transparent with the users. Thank you. Thanks, Nathan.
You bet.
Yeah, like one of the things I also see is like incentives, right? If you're incentivized to do a certain thing versus, you know, there's a shared common incentive and stuff. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Those shared incentives are so important. And that's where the error budget, like, hey, this reliability goal is not, it's not the job of operators, or more correctly, it's not exclusively the job of the operators to meet those reliability goals. That requires participation from the developers and all the way back to the business. Who's prioritizing the work that we're going to do this week? If they don't have a view into our reliability and how well we're meeting those targets, they won't make the right decisions.
Yeah. Okay, we have questions on the chat. I'll read them, Nathan, if that's easy for you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so Alex asks, what are your thoughts on SRE product managers?
SRE product managers. I'm not sure what an SRE product manager is. Alex, maybe can you give us a little bit more, say more words? And maybe we can just come back to that one, Adarsh.
Yeah, sounds good.
Great.
So let's go to the next one. Someone's asking about posting slides online, I'm sure.
Well, we'll post this recording, right? And I'm happy to share my slides for sure.
Yep. So Hanyan is asking, does Google actually turn off their services if they met their error budget?
Yeah, so this is really interesting because as a way of helping the system learn, Google sometimes will shut off services. We have internally, when we run services, we publish, this is the service level objective for this service. And we do that so that the people that are building on top of those dependencies understand what they should expect from the underlying components. And there are definitely, excuse me, cases where occasionally a service will well exceed its service level objective. And one of the best ways to get it back in line is to turn it off. And sure, maybe we'll tell people, by the way, we're going to shut off this service because it's exceeding its service level objectives too much. We want to make sure that you have built your services to match our service level objectives. And so by turning it off, we can actually expose other brittle parts of the system and say, hey, you're too dependent on this. You need to architect your application such that it is resilient to a failure, or it can tolerate a failure of this subsystem. So that doesn't happen a whole lot. Like, we don't just say, we're exceeding our reliability goal, let's just turn this off for an hour and see what happens. But what we do on a regular basis is disaster recovery testing. We will go and like turn off a whole data center. That will be a scheduled thing. Let's see, how does the overall system respond? How do our people respond? So we practice this because SRE is a practice, and you get better at it by doing it. And it's much better to practice it on your schedule than at 2 a.m. when the pager goes off, right?
Cool. So next one is, thank you. Sriram is asking, are there SRE specific tools in the market?
Yeah, are there SRE specific tools in the market? So like, the answer is yes, of course there are. And it kind of goes back to, what do SREs do, right? So SREs, if you go back to that pyramid that I don't like, so I turned it into a stack of different tags. Monitoring, of course, there are monitoring tools in the space. We talked about incident response. There are incident response tools in the industry, right? So basically any job that an SRE has to do, yes, there is a tool for it. Some of those tools have funny names like grep and awk. Some of them are like fully fleshed out systems like Datadog, like Honeycomb, and so forth. So yes, there are SRE tools in the market. And maybe the other part of this question, though, is around, how do we measure service level indicators, service level objectives, and our error budget? And there are also tools in the market for that. So if you look at cloud operations from GCP, you can set up and configure SLIs and SLOs and track where are you against the error budget. You can do the same thing with something like Honeycomb or with Datadog. I know they definitely have SLI and SLO implementations there as well. There's a company, Noble9, that is doing some really interesting things with error budgets. So yes, there are tools across the industry that can help you with this.
Maybe one more, Nathan?
Sure,
and then,
one more.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Toil is asking that all SRE jobs that I come across seem to need folks with heavy software engineering backgrounds and not as much infrastructure. How easy is it for a traditional infra person to move to an SRE role?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I think the answer, of course, is it depends. It depends, right? But let's get a little bit more specific than that. Certainly at Google, our SREs are writing code. They're writing code a lot, and we expect that an SRE is essentially a software engineer who also understands systems. Now, some of our SREs have a deeper systems level background. Some of them have a deeper software background. But the nice thing is that they can work together and build each other up across those strengths. The other thing that's true, unfortunately, is that many organizations have taken their operations team, their team of system administrators, and have changed their titles to SRE without changing the work. So if you're a deep system administrator and you want to get a role as an SRE, you can probably do so, and it will probably look and feel exactly like the work that you're doing today. Some might argue that that's not actually SRE. But then the counter argument might be, but you got a pay rise. So cool, that's good. But like at the end of the day, yes, we have to bring software engineering skills to the role of system administration, to the role of operator. If you think about just simply eliminating toil, as our systems are growing, we can't grow linearly with our systems. We have to eliminate and automate away that toil. That is going to require some software development.
Great. Thanks, Nathan, for answering all your questions and a great talk. Can we give a round of applause? I know everyone's virtual, but maybe we can.
Thank you all very much.
Yeah. And yes, I know a few people asked, we have recorded the talk and we'll be uploading it on YouTube and share. And then Nathan said he'll share the deck as well. So yeah, thanks again, Nathan. Our next meetup is on November 19th, as I mentioned, and John Alspa will be talking about incidents and learning from incidents. Again, a great talk there as well, like Nathan mentioned a quote from John. So yeah, please sign up if you're interested, and then we will see you there. Feel free to hang out. I know, Nathan, you have to run shortly, but you know, if we'll have this on for another 10, 15 minutes. So if you want to discuss something. And Nathan, do you have anything else? Like if people have more questions,
yeah,
how
for
do they
sure.
reach
If you have more questions, in the chat, I'll post my Twitter handle. My direct messages are open, so you can reach out to me there. And if that doesn't work, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know. You can send me an email. Maybe I'll just leave my email address there as well. Post my phone number. I live in Annapolis, Maryland. So if you're ever in Annapolis, give me a ring. We can hang out and grab a beer. Yeah, all that stuff. Oh, and also just one closing remark is that Black Lives Matter.
Woo!
Awesome. All right. Thanks. I'll stop.